So my paper was on the socio-emotional capital. I'm dealing with various forms of capital for my dissertation, and this is one that's a little bit less, there's a little less attention paid to this one in particular. I kind of morphed multiple forms of capital, social capital and emotional capital, into what I'm calling socio-emotional capital, and how that affects musicians in their career trajectories, our educational career trajectories. We're actually going to kind of bypass the educational portion because I really want to get you guys to get involved in what it actually means to have social and emotional capital. I found this little cartoon that I thought was pretty relevant and funny. One day, son, this will all be yours. It's just a bunch of junk in a garage somewhere. So even things like, students receiving inheritances and how that can lead to different responses socially and emotionally. This person's obviously going to have a hard time getting off the ground. There's no music equipment in any of this junk. There's, so it kind of compounds throughout the person's life, and we'll get into a lot more about what that means exactly. Briefly, I do want to talk a little bit about education and how parent education levels contribute to children's arts experiences, and how the differences in those experiences can affect their overall career trajectories throughout their entire lifetimes. You can see in the little chart I have here, parents with tertiary education degrees, which is basically anything above a high school diploma, are more likely to involve their students in sports, music, or what they have other, which is painting, dancing, all of those kinds of things as well. So just the fact that your parents have this form of, which is actually considered cultural capital in some research calls it social capital, but the idea of education transferring even through generations and affecting the students' experiences and what they're actually able to learn as they're going through their education experience. So again, that's kind of the brief background of how it could affect their education experiences. The first piece of this is the social capital. I have a little bit of a definition here: individuals, relationship, and networks, and the benefits that could possibly accrue by virtue of those relationships. You can see there are three main forms of social capital. There's what's called linking social capital, basically people that you know that can introduce you to different opportunities. There's bridging social capital, which is kind of a mentor-mentee relationships. And then there's bonding social capital, which is hanging out, becoming friends and developing personal relationships that way. And actually, I wanted to get into a couple of quick videos that I found here that really lay into what these things mean a little bit better. So we're going to, I don't know what this is all about here. Oh, wow. Right. Okay. Let's see, this is why I wanted to use mine, because I have ad blocker. Give me 1 second.
Especially, the social capital theory deals with three distinct concepts.
On the console to your right, there's a volume switch. It's
It's
lights, it's a twist knob.
There you
It can be a thing, a person with influence, a piece of software, or yet something else. Let's assume you need a camera. You don't know anything about cameras, but a friend of yours does. You're very likely to reach out to that person to ask his or her opinion as to what you need. Or say you're looking for a new job. One strategy is to explore through friends and people you know if there are any opportunities out there for you, and if you can potentially get an introduction. Or, as a third example, you might have a good idea for a new business. Once you start talking to a lot of your contacts, sanity check your idea or enrich it, your idea starts taking shape, or you might potentially find your first customer. The camera you'd buy, the job you'd be getting, or the business you'd build are determined by large part through the resources in your network that you are invoking in the process. The second concept is structure of the network, or so-called topology. Your social network comprises of people and their relationships. The size of your network depends primarily on you, your preferences, and your ability to build one. And both size and type of acquaintances and friends determine the quality, diversity, and amount of resources you can potentially access. A well-known example is that any person in the world is connected to any other person in the world through 6 or fewer degrees of separation. This was popularized with the example of Hollywood actor Kevin Bacon and the statement that any person in the world would need a maximum of 6 interactions to connect to him. The third concept is the nature of the relationship between you and others in your network. The quality of relationships determine how much of the potential access to resources embedded in someone's social network he or she can actually realize. You may be friends with some people in your network. You may hold a lot of respect for others, or you may not like yet others in your network. Relationships can involve trust and trustworthiness, norms, obligations, expectations, or feelings of closeness. So while you are theoretically only 6 or less degrees away from Kevin Bacon, it doesn't actually mean that the relationships in your network lend themselves to get connected to him.
So that last piece is pretty important. Just being able to access a person doesn't mean that you're going to build a relationship with that person. Somebody could introduce you to somebody, but if you don't have the same forms of social, emotional, cultural capital that will allow you to build a quality relationship to have access to opportunities, you're just going to be completely shunned, and there's no reason for you to even talk to that person at the end of the day. So that's a basic overview of what social capital is and how it relates to somebody. Can anybody give me a quick example of how this might relate to, say, somebody who's trying to build a music career? How might your social capital grant you access to the ability to do that?
Like somebody who can help you book gigs, or who can, hire you for different things, or, oh, I got this one person you can call, they're really good.
Exactly, yeah. So managers, public relations, all of that, even just building a band. If you don't have enough people in your relationship, or quality relationships who are willing to sacrifice, because everybody knows what it's like to play in somebody's band when it's getting off the ground. If you don't have that, you're deep in the water there. The next part, which I think is really, really important, is what's called emotional capital, and we have a definition from Cottingham. Emotion-based knowledge, management skills, and capacities to feel that link self-processes and resources to group membership and social location. So your ability to cope, in general, grants you access to different opportunities as well. So I have another, this one is a little, I don't want to say disturbing, but it's a little hard to watch. Nothing too graphic or anything, I promise. But out of these 4 children here, can you tell me off of first glance which student you think might have the most amount of emotional capital? Just by glancing at their faces and what they're doing. Top left, right? And it's pretty obvious when you see it in comparison like that. But I do want to delve a little bit deeper into this because I think this really relates to not only babies, but elementary school, middle school, high school, college, professional environments. Seeing people act in these certain ways is a big indicator of how they might be experiencing these different levels of capital. This is actually in French, so I'm going to turn the volume off and just read it to you. It's a little bit more lengthy than the other one, so I'm going to speed it up a bit as well. But I do want you to be able to see little nuances as we go. All right, Emmanuel, raised by his family, is an active explorer and eager to grab any new object he sees. He moves it from hand to hand and brings it up to his mouth, for example, engaging in play. I want you to pay special attention to their faces. Very cute, right?
Oh, yeah.
Lots of play, completely absorbed by the activity, pays little attention to those around him. Now this is another similar person, Christine, who regularly attends a nursery, does not behave much differently. She handles the block with both hands. Glancing up briefly, tries to stack them, picks them up when they fall, able to fail and recover very quickly. She too is totally absorbed by the game. These are students from emotionally stable backgrounds. On the other hand, when the family conditions are unfavorable to the point where the child has to be removed from the home, the behavior is affected as follows. Caroline, a victim of maternal neglect, is anorexic. She picks up one of the blocks, but only shows fleeting interest in playing. You can see her eyes are immediately to those around her. She frequently looks at the experimenters in the room, engages in some play, but very preoccupied by those around her. In the next cases, we also see increased attention paid to the environment, decreased attention paid to the game. Veronique, who is also anorexic, expresses refusal while raising her hands in an avoidance gesture. She's afraid to play with the blocks for whatever reason. When she finally picks one up, the worried look she casts suggests anxiety. Maybe she doesn't want to tip them over. A passive demeanor, she does not play. Jean, who was Jean, I guess, from her home at a young age, institutionalized after foster parents, emotionally deprived, prioritizes social contact. Curiosity in new objects is minimal. Accepted without resistance, but shows no real interest and immediately starts looking to the experimenters for validation or whatever it might be. And the same thing with this next child. And this goes on and on. You can see the different demeanors of these children and how this could, I'm sure you could use your imagination to think of how this could be operating constantly in the classroom in general. So I've morphed these two social and emotional capitals into what I'm calling socio-emotional capital. I made this little wheel here, which is not inclusive at all. But it kind of gives you an idea of how all of these different kinds of capital can combine into how a person operates throughout their educational career or professional in general. You can see between what's called cultural capital, which is things like education, social capital, which includes relationships, attitudes, self-esteem. And again, these forms of capital kind of blend into each other depending on the research that you're reading. So that, again, this isn't inclusive and this isn't a hard line in any respect. But it moves into emotional capital, which we just talked about, communications, emotional intelligence, and resiliency. Mental capital, which has to do with habits and habitus, actually, which is a whole different discussion. Skills, cognition. Human capital, which includes skills and cognition, your job. Symbolic capital, which includes occupations, traditions, presentation. If you're presenting yourself in a certain way, and again, you can imagine how this might apply to, if you're seeking forms of social capital, how your presentation might affect whether or not that's possible. And then this is a list I found on the side here. Musicians are more likely to experience early death. This is actually one of my prior research topics. But what people think suicide prevention is, which is just a hotline to call, but what suicide prevention actually is food security, activities with peers, to community engagement, to acceptance of individuals who identify as LGBTQIA. All of these things combined. Again, the key part here is it's combining into this end result as for what the student or person experiences throughout their entire lifetime. So I kind of moved through that very, very quickly, I understand, but I wanted to get to the activities, which I was hoping would take a little bit more time. So you can flip the pages I gave you if you have it. I have two activities here. I wanted to give you guys the choice because some people aren't as comfortable with sharing what their wheel might happen to be. I have on the left side, you can see how you're feeling today activity. I'd like you to draw an emotional image that you would play on the piano using the black keys. A lot of times, I'll draw it up here. What I'll usually put in that circle is, let's find the right marker. All right, that's hard to see, but I think you can see it. What I'll usually put is just like a blank face, and then the student can, happy, or they can draw sad, or angry, or any kind of emotion. You could choose to draw a face, you could draw a picture, if that's helpful, whatever you decide. It could be a happy, an angry, an anxious, whatever you decide. If it's a happier emotion, I'm going to ask you to use the piano starting on the G-flat key. I think you'll probably find that. And then if it's a sadder emotion, I want you to start and end on the E-flat key. Basically what I'm having you do is either play in a major or minor pentatonic. That's one option. Or, which I think you guys should probably do, even if you're not up to sharing, and we'll have one or two people share per activity, but I want you to draw a dot on each line that connects to each form of capital. Use your best judgment here. I know we haven't gotten too far into what all of these things mean, but what you think it represents in your level of each kind of capital. And then I want you to connect the dots around the circle to kind of see where you have advantages and where you might see some challenges in your life. Further from the center is equal to a higher amount of that kind of capital. So you can choose one or the other. I'll give you a couple minutes to do that, and I'm just going to leave this last slide, which is a quote from Toni Morrison. Yeah, if you need pencils or if you'd like to color, you're more than welcome to. I have some supplies up there, but this can be a brief activity. No coloring required. And I was under the impression that this was 10 minutes, so I really ran through that.
No, you're doing great. We caught you. Turn them on the line.
Yes, directly on the lines.
Then you're supposed to connect them.
Yes. plenty of time.
Yeah, you're doing great.
Okay.
Yeah, yeah.
So maybe I'll give an example of myself of each one, and then if anybody would like to contribute, they're more than welcome. Not necessary. Pretty good?
Still here.
Okay. Yeah, crystal clear what I drew, right? So that's what I drew on my little paper here. This is for the emotional picture, obviously, and this is what I would, for instance, play if I was to play the piano. So. That might be an angry or sad kind of sound. And again, all I'm doing is playing a minor pentatonic because I started and ended on the E flat key. For instance, for my social wheel here, my social emotional wheel, I have a relatively low level of cultural capital. I feel like, again, I came from a low socioeconomic background, so I felt like I could probably a little bit higher on the cultural spectrum. I'm a white cis man, so that brings me a little bit lower than others. So that's where I felt it would be the most. Okay, yeah. Okay, so symbolic capital, I'm a PhD student, so I felt that put me pretty up high. My job prospects, I've been an itinerant teacher, so that brought me a little bit lower, in my opinion. Human capital, I feel like I'm pretty good at what I do. So again, that's closer to the edges. Mental capital, again, I feel like I have a pretty good handle on my emotional and cognitive capabilities. Emotional capital, I have a hard time dealing with stress sometimes. And then social capital, again, I come from a lower SES background, so I thought that brought me a little bit lower on the scale. Would anybody like to share? Well, let's start with the wheel, because that's a little less involved. Does anybody have a wheel that they'd like to share? Again, it's not necessary at all. If not, we could just move to the other one.
I can share mine.
Yeah? Okay.
So socially, I put mine not all the way to the edge, but kind of close to the edge. You know, I grew up Catholic. That's a whole other conversation. I have really strong family ties. So I put that there. Culturally, biracial. So, you know, there's all that. Yeah. Lived in a bunch of different places, so I've seen, and I've also worked in a bunch of different places, so I've seen kind of lots of different types of people. Symbolic, you know, I'm just a master's student, I put just in quotes on it. And I know what I want to do in the future, so I'm like, it's not where I want it to be yet, but it's on the path. Human, I don't know why I put that there, but I just feel like I know how to talk to people, and I'm going to be able to have conversations with people. So I put that there. Mental and emotional, I put a little lower, just because this last semester has been a struggle, not academically, but for other reasons.
Right.
And so that's what mine looks like.
Great. Thank you for sharing.
Yeah.
That means a lot. Anybody else interested? Probably not, right? All right. Does anybody want to share what they drew and how they might try to play that on the piano? It's fun.
Mine is like yours.
Angry?
More of like the Grinch. I don't know if it's really angry, right? But it's just like, what? I am tired. I think that's my tired
Gotcha.
face. Yeah.
Right. Would anybody like to try to play one on the piano?
Go for it.
All right.
All right.
So can you tell us or show us perhaps what you drew? Or?
It was kind of like a half awake kind of sign. Like, it's like I'm here, but it's difficult. So.